And it's not as big of a gap, but age, there is a gap with the voters' age in Georgia. Donald Trump's lead widens from 2 points to 8 points among voters who are older than 50. Why do you think that is? Read the tea leaves a bit for us.
Yeah, so the age dynamic in Georgia is also very interesting and very different from what we've seen in other battleground states. And again, you have to look at this through a racial lens. Among white voters, there is a correlation between support for Donald Trump and age. As you go up the age cohorts, support for Trump becomes even higher. And so the oldest voters, seniors, those 65 and older, are expressing the widest margins of support for Trump over Harris. Go over to the other side, among black voters, the opposite is happening. So as you would go, age is also correlated to who you're supporting, and the older you are in the black voting universe, the more supportive you are for Kamala Harris. And so we have not seen this in other states. So other states we've been polling in, white voters make up a large majority of the electorate. But what we've seen in other states is that as you get older, there is a bulge of Republican support in that 50 to 64-year-old gap, sort of like the tail end of the baby boomers and Gen Xers. But as you got into the seniors, those over 65, support for Republicans tailed off. And in some states, we saw President Biden was ahead with seniors. In this case, we're seeing a direct correlation between support for the presidential candidate and the race you are as age increases. And that's really a unique dynamic that's not happening in other states, other battleground states, excuse me.
Within the past 3 weeks, this race, as everyone is aware, has really turned on its head after Trump survived an assassination attempt. Joe Biden dropped out of the race after that presidential debate. Vice President Kamala Harris is now the Democratic nominee. Because of this shakeup within the past 3 weeks, are voters more motivated now than before to go out and cast their vote come November?
Well, it's interesting, and yes, wow, what a July we've had. Um, the motivation numbers in the Georgia poll, and I wish I had a Georgia poll that happened in June that I could compare this to. I don't, but when we compare it to other battleground states, we see that motivation hasn't really changed a lot, and the motivation factor really favors older voters, and it has been the case throughout this election, and it is the case in Georgia right now. There isn't. We ask in our survey a motivation question. On a scale of 0 to 10, how motivated are you to vote? Where 10 is extremely motivated. We look at that 10 out of 10 number. Among voters who are 50 plus, the motivation number is 88%, and among those under 50, it's 70%. So there's an 18-point gap there between older and younger voters. I think there is probably a closure of the motivation gap between Republicans and Democrats, although there still is one. But I think one of the things we look at in this poll to sort of see what the impact of these changes have been is to the image of President Biden, of Kamala Harris, and Donald Trump. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are pretty much equally positioned in the state, where they're very polarized. As many people view them favorably as view them unfavorably, almost identical between the two. President Biden, his image is 17 points underwater. And so you can see that with him leaving the ticket and Kamala Harris getting on the ticket, why a state like Georgia, which had been drifting beyond the battleground state area, is now very competitive, because you've got two candidates at the top of the ticket who are equally perceived.